Greetings everyone, I'm Kurt. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're talking about adventure games. And to be a little bit more specific, we're talking about point-and-click adventure games because people don't seem to know the difference between an adventure game and a point-and-click adventure game. It's always confused me a little bit because point-and-click, I don't know how that became a genre. It's just the control mechanic. It's like calling survival horror games like of the 90s, like tank control survival horror games. No one calls Resident Evil that, but so it goes. Moving on. The adventure genre has come and gone in many ways and shapes and forms, and many of times has been declared to be dead. So of course when I mention point-and-click adventure games, I'm talking about a genre that was at its peak in the early 90s, specifically, to mention a few, anything by LucasArts, so like Day of the Tentacle, and Indiana Jones, and Sam & Max, and Full Throttle. Yeah. So I've always had a passion for adventure games. I've always adored them because they're a play at your own pace style gaming. Instead of battling your way through a world, you're kind of being eased into it. In most cases, these games don't have game overs and you can't die, and they're very heavily focused on story, characters, and puzzle solving, and that's the puzzles that kind of push that forward, push the story forward. But it wasn't until about 1998 that the genre was declared dead with the commercial failure of Grim Fandango, my favorite game of all time. But 1998 was a really tough year because you also had Half-Life and Resident Evil 2 and StarCraft. It was a big year and there were huge games coming out, and people were, from what I understand, audiences were shifting more towards this faster paced, more action-oriented style of gaming, and that's okay. That's fine. Adventure games never really died, they never really went away. If anything, they just kind of took a back seat. And adventure games consistently still kept coming out. I just don't think a ton of money was being put into them by companies like LucasArts anymore. But I feel like we're living in this weird time where adventure games are almost mainstream again. In fact, I think that 2017 is the year that I will be able to talk about adventure games and not have to tell the person I'm talking about point-and-click adventure games, and then have to explain to them that there was the style of gaming that was popular back in the day, blah, 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 blah. Moving forward, there's been a slew of really amazing games coming out in the past couple of years in the adventure genre that I have fallen deeply in love with. We have The Dream Machine, which I think is a goddamn masterpiece. I'll leave a link in the description because I adore this game. The Journey Down was a game that took me by surprise and I ended up really, really loving. We have the game Paradigm, which kind of came out of nowhere and was a Kickstarter success and is now out and I think is doing pretty well. And also, I think beyond the point and click aspect of it, I think adventure games are coming back in totally new and reinvented ways. One could argue that the walking simulator is really the modern day equivalent to adventure games. They're games that are focused solely on story and atmosphere and using those things to push the player forward, opposed to pinning the player against something that they have to defeat. I also argue that with the popularity of games like walking simulators like Gone Home and Dear Esther and Everyone's Gone to Rapture, that it's in a strange way bringing light to a genre of gaming similar to it, which I would argue is most closely would be the adventure game, the point-and-click adventure game. Oftentimes people feel that puzzles and adventure games get in the way of getting further in the story, and so there's like kind of a weird argument. There's kind of like a weird line where people would rather just play through a story than solve a puzzle, and clearly the puzzles were there to kind of give the player an objective to keep moving forward, but walking simulators have now kind of proven that with clever game design and really good writing, you don't even need the puzzles. You just need a really good story and an atmosphere and a place to put the player. But then there's games that kind of balance that out. Because then we have games like The Vanished of Ethan Carter, which kind of still cater to that slower play at your own pace, discovering a world, but at the same time has puzzles kind of sprinkled through there. And the puzzles aren't really even necessary for you to beat the game. They're just there to allow the player to figure out more and discover what's going on. And then of course we have games like Kentucky Route Zero, which is a point-and-click adventure game, but then completely gets rid of the puzzles. So there's a balance of how the genre is evolving in some ways, but still, we do have your classic puzzle adventure-based games, like I mentioned earlier, The Dream Machine and all that jazz. With this evolution of games and seeing adventure games kind of become something more, still people kind of think, like, have this vendetta against adventure games, or maybe, I don't know. So for example, Kotaku posted a story saying, point and click is dead again. That's a bold statement, and after reading the guy's story, it seems more so like he just played Siberia 3 and was really fucking mad about it and decided to say that the entire genre was dead because Siberia 3 was a bad adventure game. To me, that's like watching Howard the Duck and claiming that all fucking comic book movies are trash. And really what I think this dude is trying to get at is that Siberia 3 is a bad game, and he thinks a lot of the mechanics are dated and that the genre needs to evolve, not so much that it's dead, but whatever. But then that's kind of a contrast from IGN, who just posted a story about a week before listing the 29 must-play adventure games. So there seems to be a divide in what people think about adventure games right now and whether or not they're mainstream or whether or not they're dead. In kind of a serendipitous, timely manner, I wrote a story for Warp Zone and how I think 2017 is the year that adventure games become mainstream again. You know, maybe it's just my bias talking, maybe I'm just saying that adventure games are mainstream again because I want them to be, but this is definitely the first time in my life since the mid-90s that I was able to see new adventure games by new developers coming out and, for the most part, getting good reviews and having some amount of success. You know, and not to mention, like some of the biggest names in it, like Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert, have been releasing new adventure games. And you know, it's definitely arguable that Broken Age was kind of a catalyst for bringing adventure games back, at least out of the curtain into the mainstream world again. And then of course Ron Gilbert just made his, you know, narcissistic nostalgia love child, Thimbleweed Park, but still, from what I understand, it's been a pretty big success and people seem to love it. I don't know. Where do you stand? Where do you think? Do you think adventure games are dead? Do you even know what I'm talking about? Do you think they're boring? Or would you rather just play a game where you shoot stuff and kill stuff, which is great too, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I play those games. There will be links to all the games in the description if for those of you who don't know about anything that I mentioned, including links to the articles that I talked about. Thanks everyone. Bye.